Hi, it's Hazel, and welcome to my channel, Hazel Anaka Design. In a recent video, when I was showing how I decorated my paper cloth, this was one of the projects that I showed. So in the comments, my friend Carol from Crinkled Path reached out and said, how do you do the daisy stitch? So that's what I would have used on these flowers. So I promised her that once my hands were clean and once my nails were done, I would do a demo. So Carol, this one's for you, baby. Uh-oh, that's my light source flashing here. What I will point out here, excuse me, is that I thought that the flowers would look more realistic if there was, like in nature, a variety in petal shapes. And, you know, the jury is still out whether I go back and add a center to these flowers or not. But anyway, that's what triggered this request. So I'm hoping, see, it's kind of early. I've got a sunbeam falling across my desk. I've got, well, hopefully between these lights, it won't be too bad. So at one point, I don't even remember what this was initially, except that there were these different patterned quilt squares. So I thought, well, I don't really have a use for the entire thing, especially since the colors were rather strange. So I just cut each, this is probably a 6x6. Yeah, each 6x6 square separately. Not that it matters, but I guess I'm just laying the groundwork here. This is a light yellow with a very, very faint white design on it. So I thought if I picked a contrasting thread of some sort, it'll be easier to see. And of course, I've also lowered my phone. Maybe I should do that a bit. Anyway, hopefully this is going to work. So I've gathered a few things. So on this paper cloth, I was using black embroidery thread for the couching. And maybe embroidery thread would be the fiber of choice for most daisy stitches. However, it's not the only choice. You can use whatever you want, as long as, you know, you pick a needle with an eye that is big enough to accommodate the fiber you want to use. Now, in another video, I don't even remember which one it was, I was trying to use up some of this stuff. And you can see it's kind of loosely woven, and every so often it's got these thicker parts. This is a more challenging type of thing to try to use, so I wouldn't recommend that, especially not until a person has a few daisies under their belt. Initially, I was going to use this DMC Pearl Cotton, and this is a size 8. The two sizes I'm most familiar with are 8 and 5. And it's a little bit like the way wire gauges are measured. The smaller the number, the thicker the fiber. Now the color that I want, which is this yellowy gold, I only have in a size 8. So a little thinner than I would have liked for this demo, but that's okay. Then when I got back to my desk here, I realized that I also had this variegated crochet thread, and this might be really nice. And this was just loose. I don't know. Well, it didn't come off there clearly. And look at all this. Oh my goodness. You didn't know that you were going to have like a strobe light effects here. I should maybe turn on this other. Where is the cord though? Sorry about this. You know, this lighting will be the death of me. Okay, I don't know whether that helps or hurts, but we better get on with him. Okay, so basically pick whatever thing you want. Typically, you would want, since this is already a pre-cut length, maybe we'll try that. you want a contrasting, if you want it to show up and be kind of a focal point as it is again over here, you know, you want a contrasting color. Just trying to thread this needle. I just put hand lotion on. I can't believe, you know, we're midway through September and already my hands are chapped. Mind you, I think it's from the you know, the products that a person uses, and I don't know, I don't want all this length because that's going to be way too much. Oh, here is a, well, I'll make this work, hopefully, without too much tangling. I am using a single thread. And for those, you know, for those of you who've never seen this, apparently this is called a quilter's knot, so we'll just review that too. So you take the end of your fiber that you wanted to, that you want to knot, lay your needle parallel to it, you know, to the end of it, wrap it around a few times, and then, you know, with this thumb and forefinger, slide it down the needle and all the way to the end of the pre-cut length of thread. Now, of course, most people, that is weird. That light just went out totally. Okay, let me I showed this in a recent video. This was my husband's suggestion for how I could improve my lighting situation. It's a rigid, portable, or no, what do you call these? Cordless, well, say trouble light almost, task light. And I said, oh, but what's the battery life like? And he said, oh, 8 hours, but, oh, I better press the off switch. Clearly it needs a charging. Okay, so there you end up with quite a nice knot and really close to the end, which is, I think, a lot simpler than how I was making knots all of my life. But whatever, however you do it, make a knot. So I'm just going to, I'll probably start off in one corner here. So basically you're entering the fabric from underneath. Oh, maybe it's better when I'm in the light, in the sunbeam. This is really a long piece of thread. I'm going to double it up a little more so I don't, maybe less likely to tangle. Okay, so you sort of using your, I'm right-handed, so using my left hand, kind of hold the thread off to the side. And because I'm now on the top side, the right side of the fabric, I'm going to put my needle in again, close to where it first entered. And in this motion, I am deciding the length of the petals. Now, if I wanted a great big flower, maybe I wanted one great big flower, then naturally the petals would be a lot longer. Typically, I've never done anything that big, but, you know, once you know what you're doing, you can do it as big or as small as you want. So that's how things will look at this point. Now, again, the thing that you're sewing is going to determine, I guess, how forgiving or not this is. So I'm just pulling my needle through, trying not to tangle. So that's the next step. That's what I've sort of got, like a little lasso almost. So at this point, I'm going to just slowly tighten it up a little more so it maybe looks more like a petal. And I'm going to now go in from the top side fairly close to where that is, to where the top of that petal is. Let me hold still for a minute. So hopefully you can see that. Not in the same hole, but just very, very close to it. And that is going to be the thing that anchors that first petal. Oh, I should have shortened this thread, and I might still have to. Okay, so that's that. Now, how... I don't want to have this a video full of disclaimers, but I do want to sort of point out that how this looks is going to largely depend on the fiber that you're using, as well as the thing you're sewing into. So again, I'll just keep pointing back to that. So let's find a... So here, for instance, you can see that this is this hardly looks like a petal. It's so, like, I mean, there are two strands there. If I open it up, you can see that. Why this one is like that, I probably pulled it a little too tight. Some of this, of course, is the nubbiness of the fibers of this thread or yarn or whatever it is that I was using. So again, like in nature, we're not going to worry our little selves about that because it's going to look beautiful in the end. So there are some ways to consider what to do next. You could leave an empty area. You probably should leave an empty area in the middle for a, stamens or whatever you might want to put in the stamens. Is that the right word? Anyway, the flower center. Maybe you want this to be very regular. Because my thread is so thin, I'm going to need many petals to make this look quite full. So maybe I could go directly opposite that first petal. That may end up being a little too symmetrical. So maybe I'll just go beside it. And again, I'm not using the same hole at all. You can see I'm entering at a different point. And I think what I might end up doing here, because at this rate, it's going to take forever to do this one flower. Maybe what I'll do is, so again, my next step here is to determine the length of the petal. So I'm sticking it in, again, could be the same hole, could be nearby. So maybe I want this one to be slightly longer. So I've got my thread off to the left, I've entered underneath, and that's where the tip of the petal is going to be. So let's pull this through. What I was about to say is that, oh boy. Well, I wasn't going to say oh boy, but that seems appropriate when you're about to have a knot. I'll do a few more of these, and then maybe I'll just, for the heck of it, switch to another color so we can see how that, how adding another color, maybe the variegated or maybe this darker one, well, number one, will hopefully help you be able to see a little better, but also see, if I pull it tight, it ends up being kind of a narrower petal. But again, we're looking for the overall effect. We're not going to judge or criticize each petal as we make it, because that would be foolish. And chances are that the center of the flower is not exactly a nice little perfect circle either. So again, to point to this, that looks pretty irregular, and it is irregular, but that's going to be more how a real flower would look if you studied it. There will be, maybe there will be a bit of damage, or maybe an insect had gotten to it, or maybe it didn't grow quite right in the first place. So again, holding the thread, going in from the bottom. Again, a fairly long petal, pulling the needle through. And just to make yourself less crazy, do not use a thread as long as I am, because that, nobody needs to be fighting with knots. So again, going down at this point to anchor that petal, because if you didn't do that step, nothing would happen. Okay, let me quickly do a couple more, and then we'll and most of the time we're doing this kind of stuff not because we're embroidering something that is going to have pride of place in the home, or it's a gift for somebody or something like that. It's just a way of further decorating and adding that handmade touch to more than likely a journal or just a focal point on a card or a tag. So most of us are really busy. We have things that we want to accomplish, and time's a wasting kind of thing. So how much or little you do is going to be determined by how much effort you want to put into a particular project. Having this one daisy on this one quilt square, that could be enough, depending on what a person's overall plan is. I think that, if we were using, so back in the day, I, like many of you, would have learned to embroider on stamped goods. So one of those Aunt Martha type iron-on transfer things. So you can see, hopefully, 5 petals. So I think I'm just going to tie this off, switch to a different color, and show you how we can get a little. Now, what I learned from watching Rachel, Roxy Creations, the first season, I think, or the first slow stitching project she was using, typically you would want to, now these are kind of long stitches and far apart, so I'm just going to, and I have the added advantage of this batting here. I'm just going to, without having it show in front, put my needle underneath there. You kind of want to anchor your whatever it is. You don't just, I wouldn't just tie a knot there and hope that that does the trick. You kind of want to anchor stitches if possible. So I've gone under that one. I'll probably do that a couple more times. And when you're about to have the length, again, my thread so long, when you're about to be closing that loop, sorry, this is all kind of twisted here. You want to put your needle through that loop. Whoops. Getting hung up on the batting. And, that if you play your cards right and you don't have 3/4 of a mile of thread in your needle, I promise the next one will be better. You kind of, as you tighten that, oops, is it going to work for me? Okay, maybe this isn't the best, the best demo you've ever seen on tying a knot, on finishing off your work at the back. Oh, but you see how this is all twisted here? That's another disadvantage of, so I'm just helping this along. This will become my first knot. And I would do that a second time, get the thread mostly through. Then you've got that loop, go back through it. Whoops. Go back through it. And as you pull all that through, you end up with another knot. So, I mean, it's going to take a lot to have this come undone. Okay, let's get rid of this. And I will put in, maybe let's use the pearl cotton. It's maybe a smidge thicker. I'm cutting a much, sorry, I got a needle in my mouth. A much shorter piece of thread. I'm going to thread that. Again, needle parallel to the thread. Whoops. Wind around a few times. Now, if the thread is very thin, or if your needle has had to be quite thick because you need a certain, to have a bigger eye, you need a thicker needle. It goes without saying. I'm going to, well, I don't need to. However, in cases like this, I needed a big needle to accommodate the fibers, which meant that I was going to be making a big hole. So you need a bigger knot than the hole you're making in order to not have it pull right through. So, okay, shorter thread, this should go a little better. I'm going to just come up in between those two petals. And again, this is sort of what I was saying earlier, that nobody but botanists has counted the number of petals on any particular flower. So you could easily have as many or as few as you want. So I just want to show you that we're getting a little extra interest, a little extra, and I'm not bothering to worry about how long my stitches at the back are. Normally you don't really want such long stitches, especially if this was something that would be in daily use, because those threads would tend to get caught and be potentially be damaged just through day-to-day use. Like if this was a tea towel or a placemat or something like that. But because of the nature of this piece, there would either be a finishing fabric put at the back that would sandwich those stitches, or it might be glued straight down or whatever. Who knows? So I'm just basically, and now this is getting a little too regular for, I think this would be more interesting if it wasn't an alternation of lighter, darker. But maybe I'll add a third color just to... Now see, if I'm not careful, I could make this turn into one of those very skinny things. So I'm going to pull back a little bit so that the petal keeps its shape. It also works a lot better when you don't have such a long thread to keep untangled. So again, I think I've shown you that enough. That's why I'm not explaining every move here. Now it's more a thing of aesthetics. Okay, so now just to maybe get it from being so irregular, maybe I'll put another darker one right there beside another darker one, and I'll change the length somewhat. Oh, I was saying about stamped goods. So if you had, if you learned to embroider as a young lady, chances are you were embroidering on a tea towel or something, and it was a stamp design like an Aunt Martha's kit. So whoever designed the kit obviously would have probably made those daisies into little perfect, very symmetrical kind of flowers. Whoopsie. And my needle has come out of, or my thread has come out of the needle. So you wouldn't, you wouldn't want that blue pattern to show. So chances are you would be having a very perfect little flower. But we are artistes, and we're not following anybody else's pattern. We're creating it out of our own heads. So we have the ability to make this in whatever way we think is going to be most beautiful. Okay, so we've got those. Now I've added the variegated thread off this roll of crochet cotton. Now, whether or not that variegation is actually going to show here, I don't know. Just coming in, again, repeating. I'm going to make some little sort of dwarfy kind of, teeny tiny petals. Now, because this is so light, for those of you who love yellow, you probably think, oh, that's beautiful. This is a wee bit lackluster for moi in terms of, vibrancy or whatever. But there's nothing wrong with it. It's, a nice soft yellow. And I'm sure there's a place in the world for it as well. But what I could do is, jazz it up with a nice brown center or something. Or, again, it's almost like painting in the sense that if you wanted it to look more dimensional, you probably wouldn't do a solid mass in the middle, because that will look kind of phony baloney. But you could do, say, if you were doing French knots, which would be a nice way to finish it, you could do a few in black, a few in brown, or maybe like a really dark, like burnt orange or something like that. Imagine how beautiful that might look. Okay, I maybe will fill in a couple more. But again, artist choice. You decide when you're finished. And I am trying to vary the length. And I think, again, I have no idea what I'm going to do with this. See, what I might decide, just random, I didn't even sort of eyeball what length of thread I had chosen. You'll figure that out yourselves, what your tolerance is for fooling around with, keeping the thread in check. But what I would, if you weren't here, what I would be doing is just continue adding these until I used up the thread, because what good is it to, cut off a 4-inch piece of thread and throw it in the garbage, or worse yet, just try to save it. Like, that would be nuts, plain and simple. So I would just, since I've already cut it, it's potentially going to go in the garbage, I would just finish off. So Carol, I hope that this has made some sense to you. And obviously there are a million. I don't know why this first petal looks like that, but we're not going to worry about it. There are a million places to find diagrams or whatever. So let's see, I can maybe do 2 or so more. And of course, there's always re-watching the video, stopping, doing this. And again, this isn't rocket science. I'm sure you've got it. You know, I'm probably belaboring this a bit much, but I do want, well, I try to be thorough. I don't like telling half stories. Because if someone has asked me a question, I'm going to answer to the best of my ability. Let's put a little something in there. And in fact, see where I'm going in? I'm a 1/4 of an inch away from the center this time. That is going to add, whoops, I'm almost at the end of my thread here. I'm almost at the end of my rope here. That too will add a different look. So that's almost like a little tiny baby stitch there. Baby petal. And a thing of beauty. Okay, I'm going to stop there because sure as heck I will run out of thread. So again, working it under a little bit. Whoops, I almost don't have enough to make my... This is like painting yourself into the corner. Try to get a second knot out of there. Had to go in. Okie dokie. So, let me hold still. So that has, I mean, adding those other colors has kind of really helped, I think, to make it look a little more interesting. So I've done one off to the center. If I, in fact, I'm going to, well, I have to finish this now at this point. I would add another one maybe over here, a bigger one, and probably a smaller one over here, or vice, you know, however, because, you know, the old odd number thing does sort of matter. Now, I know that I have done some slow stitching on other of these quilt squares. And the other thing to think about is, well, do I want to fold this in half and make it a little teeny tiny journal cover? So if that was the case, and I guess I'll ponder that before I do my next flower, I would then probably do a bigger one here and maybe, you know, something, a third one on the back, end up with 2 on the front and 1 on the back cover. And now, if I didn't want to turn this into a journal cover, because of course I would have to either bind the edges, you know what, that would be a good use of bias tape. Sew bias tape around the edge, or zigzag around the edge to close off that edge. I also have, well, this is the wrong color, but let's pretend. Oh, well, I have this, you know, so that could... You would want to sandwich it, you know, so it's, this is probably too wide. I'd find a smaller eyelet, could add that, and then whatever goes on the inside to become the inside of the journal cover is an option. Okay, if I was doing that, I would zigzag this first to close in that batting. Even just stitching around would help, because as it is, you know, in a place like this, that's a pretty big opening there. Here, not so much. So that's an option. This is too wide, of course, for the size of this, but if a person wanted to sew something on the top here, that would help finish that edge as well. It would also widen increase the size of the journal cover. So Or maybe it's, if it's your very first daisy thing, maybe it turns out to be a thing of beauty and you want to frame it and hang it on your in your studio, on your studio wall. Or maybe you think to yourself, oh, you know what, I really need a tab or a pocket or something in my journal, and you cut it down and then you have other pieces to work with. So you know what to do at that point. So thank you so much for being here. Good luck, Carol. Keep me posted on how this, whether or not this helped you, and what you choose to do with it. Thanks, guys. And as always, if you have subscribed, thank you so much. If you are new or returning or have just found me by accident, welcome. I appreciate the thumbs up and the comments, and from what I hear, so does YouTube. It's part of the whole algorithms, behind the scenes math that they do. And as always, if you have questions, you know, pose them. If I'm able to help, I will. And if not, there's a lot of wisdom that surfaces through other people's comments. I know that when I'm stumped, you guys have come to my rescue with an answer, a word, some tips. So you can expect that from my people. Anyway, thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.